The world is on fire. AI is coming to replace all of us. Trust is at an all-time low. Good news? That's the premise of a new book co-written by James Patterson, yes, that James Patterson, and Patrick Leddin, today's guests on the DesuckifyWork podcast. The book is called Disrupt Everything and Win, and it's basically a how-to manual for the wacky world we're living in right now. It starts with the story of Patterson, who rose up to CEO of J. Walter Thompson in New York City before deciding to throw all of that away and try his hand at a business where about 1% of folks actually earn a living in. After blowing that goal out of the water, he decided to rewrite what it means to be a best-selling author, essentially creating a fiction writing empire and deciding it's completely normal to co-write books with folks like Bill Clinton and Dolly Parton. Then Patrick comes in, whose career includes jumping out of planes for the US Army, creating a successful consulting business, and working as a professor at Vanderbilt University, along with his current role as a co-author with one of the most famous writers on the planet. So, how do they do it? It starts by viewing disruption as fertile ground for growth, not a threat. That sounds counterintuitive when our nervous systems are screaming for some sense of normalcy, but our nervous systems have it backwards. We don't need normalcy. We need to recognize that a chaotic, disrupted world is normal. Patrick and James make this clear through 4 fundamental principles in their book. 1. The status quo is a seductive little devil. We need to accept that change is inevitable. 2. We're wired to disrupt. We have these big brains that dream up amazing things. Creativity is disruption. 3. Relationships require disruption. Lean into the ones that support you and step back from the ones that make things suck. And lastly, number 4, time is finite. Nothing lasts. So what are you going to create in this moment? The book outlines 16 disruptor behaviors that we can all tap into. The good news is that you don't need all of them, just the ones that work for you. My favorites? Believe that better is possible. Think deeply to gain insights and stand firm in the face of doubters. My takeaway from all of this? The world isn't getting any less nuts. Let's find a way to live a great life that acknowledges and even appreciates that reality. I'm up for trying. You? Welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast, the show where we cut through the BS and find ways to make work more fun, more human, and less ridiculous. All of which makes your business more profitable, by the way. If you enjoy this one, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Patrick. Okay, Patrick Leddin, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am excited to have you here. You've written a pretty interesting book with an evocative title, I would say. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about what you're doing, where the book came from, and kind of big and present in your life right now.
Well, these days, what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a movement of people who want to, take the twists and turns of life and try to turn them into something good. But where it came from was the last 12 years, I've been a professor at a university called Vanderbilt University here in Nashville, Tennessee. Sure. And I taught undergraduate business. I directed undergraduate business program. And one of the classes that I taught was called Leading Business Through Times of Crisis. It actually came out of COVID.
Okay.
So when COVID hit, TJ, they were like, gosh, we need classes online, and we don't teach classes online, and we need classes to like 100 students online, and we don't usually have those big of classes. Everything at Vanderbilt's usually like 25 students, all in person. Nice. So I was like, oh, that's an opportunity. I'll put a proposal, and I want to teach this class about leading through crisis. And obviously the timing with COVID was particularly relevant topic. So they approved it. I started teaching it. We came out of COVID into the hybrid learning, kept teaching it, went back into regular times, if you will. And I just kept teaching the class. And I decided to have one section of it be very guest speaker driven. So you'd have people like Doug Parker, who is the CEO at American Airlines, along with Sarah Nelson, who is the president of Flight Attendants Association, came together to class. So labor and management coming together, talking about how they deal with crisis. And every one of them, we had a case study written for. So it was a really neat experience for the students and myself as well. Well, one person who came to the class was the author, James Patterson. And I knew him just because how could you not walk planet Earth and at least not hear his name? But I didn't know that much about his story until I started preparing for class. And then he came in that day to talk to the students, and he started off, he said, "Hi, I'm Stephen King." which is a pretty funny opening line. And then he went on to say, "Are you living a good life?"
Mm.
And he said to the students, "I hope you are." And he said, "I'm living a good life, and I want to share with you how I went about doing it." And he started telling his story about working in advertising and becoming the CEO of J. Walter Thompson North America, and then quitting that job to focus on writing, and
Yeah.
kind of the ups and downs of his personal life too. Life isn't perfect for any of us. And when he went through it all, by the time he was done, I was like, "God, that's really interesting. This guy dealt with life challenges like all of us do, but he seemed to approach them all with okay, what can I learn? What can I do? What can I build? How can I turn it into something positive if at all possible?"
Yeah.
And that led me into about a 2.5 year research project where I put a team of students together and we studied people around the world that we deemed as positive disruptors, those who in the face of disruption look at it not as something that's blowing things up, but as something that might be fertile ground for something new or different.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting concept because, I mean, the world feels very disrupted, you know, and it feels like, you know, certainly since COVID, you know, it feels like it's never quite fully gathered its footing. There's been
yeah. I'm almost hesitant. You probably heard my voice. I'm like, well, when COVID went back to normal,
sort of normal.
I'm almost hesitant to say it because, like, what's normal?
Yeah, and I think like something in the world has changed where it rarely feels normal.
Yeah.
And, you know, people might call that quote unquote the new normal, but whatever it is, we need to sort of be with it. Right.
Yeah. It's interesting how I remember when we were in the midst of COVID, how people would say, "I wonder when it's going to be like when we go back to normal, or when are we going to go back to normal?" And then we'd start hearing people say like the new normal. I think what it is though, is it shows us just, you know, every time we think we have something just under control, we all of a sudden realize how fragile normal really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is like sort of beautiful advice, really, because there's such a human instinct to want to control and feel like we've got it figured out so that we can just exist in the world. And what I feel like you're getting into in this book, and perhaps what James has lived, is it's never really been that way. We've never really had all that much control. We can kind of control what's right in front of us. But the circumstances come at us and they're going to be weird and different and terrible and beautiful and all the things. And how do we not just tolerate it, which is, I think, what a lot of us probably do, is how do I sort of bear down and tolerate the chaos in the world? It feels like your book is a little bit more of an invitation. I mean, it disrupt everything and win. So that feels like a much more optimistic view of disruption. But I think most folks are probably sitting here going, well, that sounds almost impossible. So how did you get to a perspective that feels so both counterintuitive, but also hopeful?
Well, I think part of it was coming to grips on what we call them the four fundamentals in the book that we all just need to come to grips with. One is that the status quo is a deceptive little devil. Yeah. You know, if you like things the way they are, TJ, enjoy the moment, because they're going to change. I mean, that's what it is. And I do think things like COVID helped us all realize how fragile the status quo is, that things will change. We all had this, you know, shared experience. The second one, though, is the second fact is, okay, things are going to change, but it's okay because you're wired to disrupt, which is interesting to people, I think, because oftentimes we think, well, you know, somebody else is wired to disrupt, or somebody else is designed to be creative, or you know, I just like consistency, and our brains like consistency, and that is all true. But at the same time, everybody listening to this podcast has a big brain that can dream up amazing things, different than any other animal on planet Earth can do. So we're able to disrupt because we have big brains. We can be creative. We can begin to manifest that new reality. We also are wired to disrupt through our own experiences. Like what we've been through in life has taught us things, and everybody's on a different journey, but each of those journeys can be really informative. So that helps wire us. And then the third way we're wired is we're wired to disrupt by our resources, by what we have around us. If we apply them in new and different ways, can allow us to disrupt. So we really believe, honestly, that people are wired to disrupt. When we were doing the research for this book, we interviewed exactly 350 people we sat through long form interviews with. And the person we ended up telling the story about in this chapter was the actor Marlon Wayans. And Marlon Wayans, people don't know him. He grew up in New York, youngest of 10 kids. 5 of them now work in Hollywood, make their money in movies and TV. And at a young age, he had a lot of success. He was on a show, one of his brothers, actually 2 of his brothers created a show called In Living Color. and he was on that show in his teenage years. And then he had a show with his other brother called Weigh-In Brothers. He had a lot of tremendous success early on. And then as he explained to me, he said that the phone kind of stopped ringing. And his brother, Keenan Ivory Wayans, said to him, if you want the phone to ring, you better learn to write and direct and produce and act type of thing. Yeah. And we use that as an example because you might go, well, yeah, Marlon Wayans is wired to just, disrupt. He's this creative force, but we argue that we all are in our own ways. So that's the second one. You're wired to disrupt. The third fundamental fact is about relationships. Relationships in life are like really important. We live in a sea of relationships. It's a team sport, whatever you want to call it. Work, life is a team sport. And you have some relationships in life. You talk about Desuckify. You have some relationships in life that help you desuckify work. Yeah. They are the tailwinds at your back and push you along. And then you have the other ones that cause work to kind of suck sometimes, which they're blowing right in your face. And we get into like the idea that if you live in a sea of relationships and there's the opportunity for you to lift people up or people to lift you up, why aren't we doing more of that and less of the blowing in people's faces? And we encourage people to maybe disrupt some relationships in positive ways. And then the fourth fundamental fact says your time is finite. Your time on this team, your organization, your family in its current configuration, your time listening to this podcast, it's all finite. So let's make it count in ways that matter. And that's the launching point as we go into this argument around, hey, you can be a positive disruptor.
Yeah. I mean, I like all of those. I mean, the last one is the one that kind of punches you in the gut a little bit. And the other ones feel a little bit like you sort of feel like you know them, but you actually don't. I think about relationships. Like we kind of understand that relationships are important, but we maybe are not navigating them, interacting with them, creating them in a way that actually, come back to James's point, like creates a good life for us. We sort of just sit back and accept that they are what they are, as opposed to going, I can influence this. I can change how the wind I'm blowing. If I'm maybe blowing wind in somebody's face, I can adjust that. If somebody's blowing wind in my face, I can think about how I interact with that person that might change it. Right. So there's an understanding, but maybe not an action happening around stuff.
Yeah. Like it's funny because there's one side of me that says, okay, Patrick, you studied this for 2.5 years. And the first thing you're going to tell me is 4 things that most people could kind of write down about life. Yeah. But isn't that kind of true? It's like we live in it so much and we don't actually see it. So laying those things out is kind of helpful to folks. And you're right. I mean, there's some relationships that, maybe some relationships that need to be ended in your life, quite frankly. Sure. They need to be that disrupted. There's other ones you're like, I don't want to end it, but I'd like to make it better. I'd like to get it back to where it was. That'd be great. Or there's some relationships where you're like, you know what? It's kind of sideways, but maybe I can put some boundaries in place. Just helping people think about that. And one of the reasons we spent a fair amount of time in the book talking about relationships is because A, we thought they were important. B, they came up in every person we talked about relationships. But as we were writing the book, it was kind of crazy. Patterson challenged me in so many ways, but one thing he challenged me to do is he said, as you're working, even on the outline, as we're initially thinking about this, just get out and talk to audiences about it and see what resonates. And there's a beauty of going out and talking in front of people, and something sometimes just comes out the right way. And you're like, okay, that's a line that lands. Yeah. And one I found is I would tell a story in front of these audiences just about disrupting a relationship with my parents. And that would like click with people, and people would come up later on, like, I just texted my brother, or I just did whatever, like that type of thing. And there was like this yearning to fix some of the relationships in life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you made a good point. I think it's almost like, what's the thing about like the fish doesn't really know what water is or something like that.
Fish discover water last.
Yeah. So it's that kind of thing. We're so immersed in our relationships that we don't really fully see them and recognize actually that we have some ways we can shift them. And the other thing you touched on, I thought that was interesting, was like the skills and the talents and the things that we already have are tools for us. And what I was thinking about was, I come from advertising. You mentioned James Patterson also came from there. And a lot of folks listening may come from there. And one thing I hear from a lot of folks in that industry, and this may be true for others, is the world's feeling kind of disruptive right now. And there's some folks are wondering, like, should I stay in this industry? And then they go, but I don't know how to do anything else. And I sit there and I go, are you kidding me? Think about all the things you've done. Describe what you've actually done. And now tell me that you couldn't go take that set of skills and bring it into something else. That's crazy. But it feels so, you just get so surrounded by the walls of your world that you can't see outside of it. So I'm curious if you encountered that at all. And if so, what flips the switch for people to realize, oh my God, I actually do have things that can help me disrupt my world?
Well, a couple thoughts on that. I had a similar experience into what you were just talking about there because I was in the military in my 20s. So I did the Army Airborne Ranger thing, and
wow.
my last job was I was a company commander in a unit called the 82nd Airborne Division, and before I got out, so I had like for several years, I was just pretty good at turning right when they told me to turn right and left when they told me to turn left and shut up when they told me to shut up. And when I came out of the military, I was a little bit like, what's my value? I don't know what my skills are. How does this apply? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, can you communicate? Yeah, I think I'm pretty good at that. Can you collaborate? Yeah. Can you help cast a vision? Yeah, I think pretty good. And it's the same thing for people listening to this if they're coming out of different roles to realize, there's a bigger world out there and they will value what you bring to the table, but you have to value it yourself first and kind of own it and be able to articulate it is a really critical thing. And then as far as people dealing with disruption, and some people, I think all of us to varying degrees, the ground is shaking beneath us, especially with things like AI.
Yeah.
Patterson called me this morning. We're months after the book came out, and he talks to me 2-3 times a week about this particular project. He's very passionate about it. And one he was talking about an article he just read about AI and just how it's changing everything. And I was actually talking to somebody a while back who was probably in the shoes of some people listening to this. This guy wrote copy mostly for a living.
Okay.
So he's a writer, but he would also write speeches that the CEO would give, contribute to speeches. And he said, I love writing. I've been doing writing my whole career. I'm at a certain age now, and I'm kind of settled in and comfortable in life. And now my CEO just read a speech that was probably 80-90% written by ChatGPT. He's like, I'm going to lose my job. Yeah. And I just said to him, I said, hey, you might lose your job. That could be a reality. Things are being disrupted, and none of us know. I mean, I write books. Good night. But I said, but do you think there's a possibility that you could be more valuable to your company, not less valuable to your company with AI existing? And he was like, I think there could be. Yeah. All right, cool. Let's explore that. So, it's an interesting world, but I think as much as we can feel like, and you said earlier, that there's, what do we have control over? Well, we have control over our mindset, our behaviors, to some degree, the relationships we forge with other people, although that's a two-way street. Yeah. But we can influence them. And I think that sometimes it's so easy to turn the TV on and see all the news out there, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you got to put yourself in the driver's seat as best you can.
Yeah. And I really like that story because you just allowed him to shift his thinking with one simple question, like, could you be more valuable with AI? And it's like, sometimes it really only takes that. It just takes this shift of perspective because we're so locked in. And it feels like in a world where disruption is happening more and we're trying to make it an advantage to us, it's the ability to make those pivots. And ask ourselves those questions or surround us with other folks who maybe will also ask those questions to just reframe what's in front of us when maybe our natural tendency to kind of narrow our view takes over. It's like, what's going to pull us out of that? I mean, is that a skill you noticed in some of your research, the ability to just shift? Yeah.
Actually, what we found we found this pattern that played out as we were interviewing people and going through and looking at the transcripts and then coding it, as on the qualitative side of the research to figure out like, what do these people do? And what we found was that the reality is we're all the disrupted. All of us get disrupted. Yeah. But some of us can choose to turn it into something. And what they would do is that the first thing they would do is they would discern. They would step back from it. So they wouldn't just react. They recognize I'm not Pavlov's dog. If the bell rings, I don't have to salivate. I can choose something different. And they step back and they say, okay, what role should I take on right now? Should I lean into the change? Should I pull back from the change? Should I go out on my own? Should I bring other people with me? What role should I move into? And we have different, names for the roles in the book, but essentially that's what they do. They look at these different roles. And that's a really critical piece because it is so common for us to go stimulus response. If I go to this meeting and I see that person and they say this, I'm going to lose it. Or if, whatever, it's like, well, that's a choice. It's
Yeah.
a choice you make. Maybe you're pre-wiring yourself walking in thinking that, but it's a choice.
Sure.
So by just asking him that question that day, I just hopefully helped him just to step back and discern, okay, you know what? Yeah, I see that there's a possibility I could do something different. Here's what I need to do. I need to, in his case, he's like, I need to learn more about AI than
Yeah.
anybody else around here.
Yeah.
So I become the go-to person.
Right. Mm. The stimulus response thing is interesting because I think about certainly in the corporate world, and this may just be true in work in general, but everything sort of feels sped up and it just keeps going faster. And that seems to drop us into that stimulus response state more consistently. There's less time to pause and breathe and think and evaluate, and we're just in it. And I notice this with a lot of my coaching clients. It's just people are feeling like a punching bag.
Yeah.
And then they're just trying to react to it. So in the midst of all that, what are the skills or practices that can help us not ignore that, because that's what the world I'm living in, but still somehow find a way to take a moment and ask those questions or talk with somebody who might help me see another perspective? How do you make that a habit in the midst of the crazy?
No, I think that's a totally fair question. And it's interesting. As we were writing the book, it just so happened that Patterson went on the Mel Robbins show, her podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And, she had the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and the let them. And he came back and we were talking about it. And he said, one thing that's really smart about some of the things that she does is she takes it from the theoretical or the abstract and just gives you some tactical things to play with. So we kind of went back through the research again and said, okay, what would be some things that we could provide people that would give them just that, like you just said, TJ, like some things they could do.
Yeah.
We ended up we kind of sprinkled them into the book. It wasn't like a whole chapter saying do these things, nor do you have to do all these things, but we put in 27, we called them positive disruptor moves.
Okay.
They were just little things that you could do. So if you're like, one of them is question it. It's the idea if you're in a room and it just feels off, you feel like the conversation's not right, instead of walking out and go, that felt weird, just ask. Just bring it up and say, hey, are we a little off right now? One of those things. Or one that specifically gets to what you were just talking about there was the idea that before you get out of bed every day, before you pick up your phone, and you hear it so often, but just take a moment and just kind of say, all right, what role am I going to take on most today? One of those type of questions before your feet hit the floor. Because once your feet hit the floor, oftentimes you're right in the midst of it. And I think there's a lot of things that people could do. I imagine there's people listening to this who are leaders of other people.
Yeah.
And there's probably some things that they're doing that, whether they recognize it right now or not, they're actually exacerbating the situation by rewarding more of the activity and the busyness, and at least passively not rewarding or punishing the stuff. Because if we were in work together and you were my boss, there's a good chance that let me reverse it. Let me be that bad guy here. Let's say you worked for me.
Yeah.
And you're sitting in your workspace, and I walk by a couple times during the day, and I just see you sitting there, maybe looking off into space or something. And I walk by and say, TJ, what are you up to? And you're like, I'm thinking. And I'm like, well, get back to work.
Yeah.
It's like thinking is actually a skill.
Work.
It is work.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like work. I mean, that's one of the reasons that people have struggled when we initially went into the COVID situation, because the ability to work from home has been there for a long time, but the ability to not look right over your employee's shoulder is concerning to people. And maybe rightfully so in some instances, but not in others. So the ability to give your people some space to think, to make it okay to plan blocks in their schedule where they're actually not sitting in a meeting or not actively doing something, but they're actually spending some time thinking about things that are important but not urgent is a really key thing. And the same thing goes for all of us. So trying to find those places and spaces to do that. I was actually talking to a young lady the other day who's a mountain climber, a really good mountain climber.
Okay.
And I asked her, tell me about those of us who aren't up on mountains all the time like you are. Or those of us, I've been up on a few, but tell me about the people who never get to go up there. Bring down from the mountain some stuff that they're not seeing that you see up there. And she's like, it's the connection with nature. It's the beauty of it. It's the quiet of it. It's the fact that your device doesn't work. It's all of those type of things that she said makes you want to go back up there. And I think it's kind of interesting to go, well, gosh, I could have that right here. Everybody who has an iPhone probably has something go off like once a week and tells them how much they've been on their iPhone this week.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. unfortunately. But yeah, like it's really interesting as you describe that, because you mentioned like, well, we can do that anywhere, right? And it feels so much harder, right? If I go climb a mountain, it's like, well, I'm choosing to do a thing that will then put me in a position where I have no choice but to be away from my phone and away from all that. But I've had clients who, like, one of the biggest things that they've decided to do is to just put their phone in the other room before they go to bed.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it literally is hard. That's the thing. I don't want to like dismiss it, because we've become, these phones are designed to addict us. So I think it's obvious that they are. And so to simply put it in another room actually can be a hard behavior to learn and continue.
Yeah.
But
it can be panic, anxiety,
yeah,
at least producing for people. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have people I talk to who are genuinely, if they're not by their phone, there is this anxiety around what would I miss, and particularly as it relates to work, but it could be around family and other stuff too. That's the thing. But to simply, so you start to have that behavior and you start to recognize that the world doesn't fall apart when you put it in the other room, or when you climb the mountain, or when you do whatever, you just go for a run and you say, I'm not even going to bring my phone with me on my run, like those things. It is an interesting shift, and it does remind us, but it does feel a little terrifying at first,
It does. It's funny too, at least from my perspective, and I may be the N of one on this one,
Yeah.
but sometimes I'm with somebody else and they're on their phone, and it kind of can irritate me a little bit. Like,
Yeah,
okay, we're having a conversation here.
Yeah.
But I don't even see it myself when I'm doing it to someone else, and I know I'm doing it. Somehow in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's okay. I'm just doing X, Y, Z. It's like, well, put yourself in their shoes, and they're kind of like, we're sitting here on the couch trying to have a conversation, and you're buried in your phone.
I know. You are not an N of one on that one, because there's at least one more here on this conversation. So I think that's like a powerful insight, just to recognize that we can create those moments, even when it feels hard. We have the ability to create moments of separation and moments to think. And your story about that reminded me, I had a boss years ago who would occasionally come in and go like, every time I walk into your team, they had kind of their own space. They're kind of laughing and chatting. It's like, do they ever work? And I was like, that's work.
Yeah.
I was like, these are creative people. They're trying to come up with ideas. The communication, the laughter, the chatting, the play, that's part of the work just as much as sitting there staring into nothingness is part of the work. And then sometimes, they sit at their computer, they put their headphones on, and they're banging out a design, or they're writing something or whatever. But all sides of that matter. And I think, in the current climate, it feels like there's less room for that. If you're leading an organization, how can you invite that and also feel confident that the work's going to get done when it's crazy?
Yeah, I'll give you my own experience. It's not anything in the book or in the research, but after I came out of the military, I went to work at a firm called KPMG Consulting.
Oh yeah.
And it was Brooks Brothers suits back then, right? It was button up suit and tie every day type of environment. I did that for a couple of years. And then I left to start my own thing. Actually, my wife and I started what we would now call a side hustle. But we were moonlighting on a project that just started to grow. And I left my day job and I went to work with her, and we opened this company. And for the next 11 years, we ran it. We were acquired back in 2012. But up into the process where we were acquired, we opened up a few offices. We had offices in different cities, and many of the consultants that worked with us, including myself, we were still kind of Brooks Brothers-ish. We were still pretty buttoned up and wearing suit and tie back then. And we decided in every one of our offices, we'd put a room in that we'd set aside, and we call it the Idea Lab. And we just painted the walls so you could write on them, and made it colorful and kind of comfy and all that type of stuff. And what I found is just by putting that space there and making it okay to kind of do some of those things, even in a buttoned up type of environment, it was really helpful to people. And I found that more of our meetings were being held in that room than the regular conference room. So I think that part of it is just as a leader recognizing that. And I think for me, it was less me recognizing, oh, it'd be good for them. It was probably just like, I like to write on the walls and I like to brainstorm, and this will be good probably for my work. And guess what? It turned out to be better for other people than even for me. And I think that as a leader, you need to be able to be willing to create the space for collaboration. That could be space in the schedule. It could be a physical space. It could be the mental space. It could be whatever space you want to limit, but you've got to create the space for these things. If you want people to turn up to 9 and 10, their creative engagement, you've got to give them the space. And by the way, when they do it and they do it well, regardless of what type of role you're in, when you see people doing what you want them to do more of, you got to make a big deal out of it.
Oh yeah.
All right. Because make them feel 10 feet tall because they are.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you're liking what you hear and like the idea of making work not suck, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. What role is work playing in your life right now? Let's talk about it. Okay, back to the show. You touched on something really interesting there because you mentioned part of the impetus behind this was your own want, right? You liked writing on the walls, you liked that stuff. And I think sometimes when we think about these corporate environments, there can be a belief that like the folks who are leading the organization may not want this. They just, because they are coming down on their teams maybe hard and, do your work. But I think if you speak to anybody who's in an executive position, they want it too. And they don't believe they can have it. And they don't believe they're allowed to have it. And that's probably what then filters it down into the whole team.
Well, they've been told that's not executive presence.
Yeah.
Things, right?
Which is such a weird term because I think I get it. There is certain things as an executive in terms of recognizing the influence of your behaviors and realizing that people are paying attention in a way that maybe they weren't before. But there's a version of executive presence that shows up like you did in your business, right? Which says, I'm going to model and celebrate the behavior that I want from myself and others. And then you kind of create a habit around that,
Yeah, I guess the question would have been, well, what if I'd put those walls up like that and I was the only one using them? Would I have been aware enough to go, this is working for me, but it's not working for others? And I've been in places where they, I'll work on a project or something, and the project, the client that I'm reporting to, forces you to use certain tools, and you start to get the vibe when you're talking to other people on their team on the client side. That nobody likes that tool except that leader.
Yeah,
everybody feels like it's a massive chore to do this thing. Because it's a pet tool for the leader. So
it's a bit of an art form, I think.
It is, because there's sometimes where it's like, well, the leader actually has a good instinct of a tool that's really useful, and other people just from a professional maturity or whatever you want to call it perspective just haven't realized the value of it, but they will if they're exposed to it long enough. There's other times where it's like, this is a drag. Everybody feels like they're feeding this system, and nobody sees value in it. So it's you got to find the balance.
Yeah, that's that self-awareness I think that you need to have, and just the broader awareness. And I've worked in places where those kinds of things have been tried to be kind of pushed on you. And I think some of that's it, right? It's the delivery. If you're pushing it, then it feels like another thing I have to do as opposed to create the space and then see what happens.
Yeah. That's the thing. Is people say oh, people don't like change. I don't necessarily agree with that, because we change all the time. Right. We change and adapt all the time. Even our own little habits or practices, we change them all the time. We just don't like to have it forced upon us. Yeah. Without us having a voice in it. Yeah. Yeah. That talk about making work tough. A lot of times it's when change is just being forced upon you without you even being able to have a voice in it, especially if your perspective would be valuable. Yeah.
And I think that's felt a lot, probably always, but today I hear that a lot from folks, that they're craving the ability to have some input and influence over stuff, and they're not always feeling that. So that's another thing I think as a leader that you can certainly do, which is find a way to bring that in. And it doesn't have to be everybody has an equal voice. It doesn't have to be every big decision is by this giant committee, but there are ways where you can learn to invite those voices and do it in a way that's beneficial to everybody.
Yeah. I have a couple thoughts on that. One is that there's an expression I believe to be true, that no involvement means no commitment. So if I'm not, it doesn't mean that I have to have every one of my suggestions played out, like you said, take it under consideration. Yeah. But I should be given the opportunity to put my DNA in this thing too, get my fingerprints all over it. Because if I do that, I'm involved in creating it. I'm more committed to it. There's a different degree of ownership, and there's the expression nobody washes a rental car because they don't own it. I want people to own. And the other thing is you were talking about that, I was just thinking about, and I just lost my train of thought. But I was thinking about something that was really brilliant, but I just disrupted myself and totally forgot it.
That's all right. Send it to me after, and I'll dub it in when you're just moving your lips there.
Exactly. It'll
Maybe
come to me in a minute.
we'll get back to it. I think, one thing that's sort of shown up in this conversation that's interesting to me is your own career journey. I mean, it's quite unique in many ways, right? You were in the military. I don't know, you're jumping out of planes or whatever you're doing.
I jumped out of planes for about 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you worked in a very buttoned up sort of consulting kind of environment, and then you started your own thing, and then you're in academia, and now you're writing books with James Patterson. That's a pretty interesting journey. How did that evolve for you? And I'm curious today, like, what role is work playing for you in your life, and maybe relative to how it's been over the years?
Well, I wish I could have said, I don't know if I would have planned out my career the way it played out. I don't know if I would have seen those curves.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a particularly disciplined kid growing up. I was the youngest of 5 on the south side of Chicago. I would do quite frankly, I do the minimum just to get by. I was that kid, had a lot of good times with my friends. And I graduated high school, and nobody really there weren't a lot of people going to college. I went to junior college. I failed out of junior college. I mean, I was like, I'm on not a great path. And I joined the National Guard out of like desperation, I think, at that point. And it just kind of clicked for me. It was the right discipline I needed. I needed to, grow up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then once I started doing it, I was like kind of good at it. Like they'd say run, and I'd just go run or whatever. So I was pretty good at it. And then it just kind of clicked from there. But as far as I think when I look back on it, on most of it, I'm pretty good at like, I'm sure I could do a better job. So I'm not going to try to be braggadocious here, but I'm pretty good at pushing myself. Like I'm persistent. I'm a pretty persistent individual.
Yeah.
And I'm also really, really good with ambiguity.
Okay.
I have no pride. I have no qualms of like put myself in ambiguous situations where I don't know how it's going to play out. And I think those two things are kind of good for me because a lot of times when you're trying to do something, you're going to run into obstacles along the way, and those obstacles can slow you down. But for me, stubbornness or whatever it might be, I'm just like, you know what? I don't know exactly what the obstacles are going to be, but I'm going to figure my way through them because I know I'm trying to get up that mountain or get that thing done or whatever it might be. So I think that that's actually been helpful to me because initially when, going back to when Patterson talked to my class, so I thought to myself, I said, I'd like to study that. And then I wrote him a note. Oh, TJ, it was like the worst sales pitch note you've ever heard, right? I was like, I like you, you like me. Let's write a book together.
I love it.
It was like crickets, right?
Yeah.
And then, so then I came back about 10 days later with a better argument. I was very fortunate years ago. I worked with and around Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? So I had a long-term relationship with those guys at Franklin Covey, and I just saw what that one particular book did. And I went to Patterson, made a better argument about why we might make sense to partner. And he said, all right, let's explore it. Let's, Patrick, draft an outline and we'll go from there. So I drafted an outline. I sent it to him. He hated it. I mean, hated it. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it another shot. And the second one, I think he hated more than the first one. The second one, I tried to write like in his style. Oh my God. I hope that never sees the light of day. The opening chapter.
Yeah.
So then I was like, all right, strike 2. Let me regroup on this thing. So I took a few months to regroup on it. And in the process of doing that, I went and saw the chancellor at Vanderbilt and said, I think I could write a book with this gentleman who's a graduate of Vanderbilt, probably good for the university and for me and for him. But I need you to sponsor a project for me. And I literally said it like this. Is kind of crazy now that I think about it.
Yeah.
I went into the chancellor, which if people don't, that's the president of the university. That I'm a faculty member. We try to avoid the chancellor. It's like nothing good's going to come out of, I jokingly say that.
I get it.
Yeah, but you get it. So I make it a point with him. I go and I say, and this is exactly what I said. I said, Chancellor Dearmeyer, I have a 15% chance of writing a book with arguably the world's most successful author right now. If you give me what I want, it goes up to 50%. And if I do what I promise you I'm going to do, it'll go up 2 to 3% more each month. Okay. So he said, what do you want? I said, I need a research team. I need some funding for some things. He said, okay, you got it. So technically I walk out the door with 50%.
Yeah.
Right. So now if you add up the number of months and you average 2 to 3% to 2.5%, 20 months later to the month is when we sold the book.
Oh, wow.
And then began finishing up the writing process. So that was like, that's part of the idea of like, you got to throw something against the wall sometimes and just go for it. So I just share that because that was like an example in my career where like you take a little bit of a risk. You put yourself out there. You have an idea what could possibly happen, but you're not sure how it's going to exactly play out.
Yeah.
You're not afraid. I'm not afraid to ask for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I think more of us should own kind of what we bring to the table. Doesn't mean you have to be a jerk or difficult, or if they say no, my life goes on, and I don't ask for everything. And I'm also an advocate, like, you don't show up at if I had just shown up day one and was started teaching at the university and immediately said, I'm going to go talk to the chancellor and pitch this idea.
Yeah.
Which people do sometimes. They're like, I've been teaching there for 8 or 10 years at that point, 8 years probably at that point. And I felt like, you know what? This is now the time to go talk to somebody about something like this. So I always tell people, like, you got to do the job they hired you to do before you tell them how to fix everything else. But
that's a really good point, because I know I've definitely been the guy who didn't follow that advice at times. You show up and you just want to like take big swings, and that's maybe just a little bit.
But that goes both ways though, right? Because sometimes. So that's the one side. Hey, as the employee, kind of trying to be savvy about how you position things, and not that I'm particularly savvy, but just try to think it through. And the other side, though, is as the employer, you hire somebody after looking at their resume and maybe talking to a few people they recommended as references, which by the way are going to say good things. And then also you interview them and you bring this person in, you tell everybody, I got this great talented person come in. I'm really excited they're going to fill the role. And as soon as they come in, you like squash the power right out of them. I mean, why do we do that? We don't, all of a sudden it becomes, all the stuff you did before, we're so excited to hear about that during the interview. And then once you start, they're like, don't tell us about where you were at before. You're here now.
Stuff.
It's like, wait a minute,
this is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. Yeah, no, that's a good point. There's definitely, again, a bit of a dance there and a little bit of an art form. And I think, I remember at one company I worked at, we would say actually, like, people have about a 3-month window here where we can get something out of them that is going to tell us sort of our blind spots, our stupid behaviors, our bad habits. Because after the 3-month point, they're so dunked in it that they don't see it anymore. It now just becomes normal. So there's really an opportunity in those first 3 months with somebody to kind of go like, tell me something. What in the world do you see that's crazy here right now? And it doesn't mean we can automatically fix it, but it's at least good to be aware of it and then go, okay, let's see what we can do. Let's try to tweak it at least a little bit. And I imagine that's probably true in most organizations. There's a period after which you've fully put on the suit and you can't see it anymore.
Yeah. And even if you saw it, saying it means you have to like suggest something even you are doing is not right.
Yeah. You're now owning it. Yeah.
Right. But that's something that leaders can model for folks as well. Yeah. The funny thing is I've led some teams over the years, and I certainly haven't had all the answers. I'm pretty good at like saying I don't know, because I just don't. Yeah. And what I've found is I've never had a team where I say, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know where to go with this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I've never heard one where everybody crosses their arm and says, well, good luck to you, Patrick. Hope you make it. Every one of them has thoughts and ideas. And by the way, they root for you to win,
right?
Which is pretty wild. Yeah. Because we oftentimes think in our mind, it's like this, the team and the team leader, and sometimes they gel and sometimes they don't, which is probably true. But there's also times where we think that like it's the team is sitting back to watching the team leader mess up, and they don't want, they don't maybe they do, but they don't necessarily want to. That's not by my experience.
I think typically,
they want it. Maybe when you hit a certain point, they're ready to watch you.
I think there are certain times when that can feel true. Yeah. But I think for the most part, you're part of a team. You want the team to do well, and that includes the team leader. And to the extent that you can serve that or support that, I think you do want that.
I think there's times where the team leader kind of crosses over the Rubicon and you can't come back. Because at that point,
and that happens. Yeah, that definitely happens. And those are the instances usually where somebody ultimately leaves or is let go, because it's just, you've pulled apart any threads of connection, and they're sort of unhealable. But 98% of the time, the
narrative oftentimes it persists is that's the situation, right? When it's actually not the true narrative. That's the acceptance, not the rule.
I agree with that. Yeah. You mentioned something interesting in your story about how this book came about, that, in all this talk about disruption, there's sort of that initial, like, I'm going to try to disrupt things. Hey, I'm going to suggest to James Patterson that we write a book together. That's disruptive. But you also exemplified like a whole lot of persistence in that, and not like blind persistence, but persistence that was armed with new knowledge each time, right? Well, that didn't work. All right, I'm going to try something else. Well, that didn't even work. Worse. okay, now I'm going to go rethink this and I'm going to go talk to this person and then I'm going to go do the research and then I'm going to come back. And like you said, it took 20 months plus whatever to finally land it. So there's this combination of persistence and the ability to learn from failure and some other traits that are showing up there. And it brought me back to something in the book, which is you had outlined, I think, 16 disruptor
16
behaviors. Can you talk a little bit more about those? What are the things that we can be doing to lean into maybe some areas where we're already naturally strong to make disruption work for us?
Well, it's funny when we were doing that, I was pushing with my research team. I really didn't want to find 16 behaviors. I want to find one or two and be like, these are, I mean, the book, if it just said like, do this one thing, we sold probably 10 times more. But that wasn't the case. There ended up being these 16 behaviors. And the nice part was though, that nobody we studied nailed them all. Nobody had like all these 16 behaviors. And TJ, there was no magic combination. It was like, if you have 1, 3, and 8, you're golden. There was a whole hodgepodge of different things, which I thought was actually positive to see that. And I think what really exemplified how good it was that everybody I talked to, everybody, if they do a self-assessment or think it through, has at least 1 or 2 of these, which means we're all in the game. Right. So just so people know, there's these 16 behaviors of positive disruptors. We organized them into what we called the anatomy of a disruptor, just to help us remember it better, quite frankly. So we took each of the 16 in pairs and connected them with a body part. So you go, there's 2 for the brain, 2 for the eyes, 2 for the mouth, 2 for the ears, etc., all the way down to the feet. And what we started to realize is that like I said, some people are good at these, some of these, and others at other ones. Like one of the ones, the last one we talk about is, and the feet one, the 2 at the feet are, one is you run toward disruption. Okay. Which, by the way, it's called disrupt everything. It's not called change everything. Because sometimes the most disruptive thing you can do is not chase the change, is to say no to it. And we want people to have the understanding like, hey, sometimes you go after change, sometimes you go after stability. And that's disruptive too. So, but one is a run toward disruption was one of the feet ones, which is the idea of like, we mentioned AI earlier, being the person who says, I'm going to go find out what that's about. Not doesn't mean I'm going to be, change my whole life over and become an AI guru necessarily, but I'm not going to be fearful of it or bury my head in the sand. I'm just going to go try to figure this out. I'll get to the edge and look at it. The other one was stand firm in the face of doubters is another one that people do. And that's probably one I have pretty good. I'm pretty good at standing firm when somebody says, something can't be done. I like to think, well, who says it can't be done? And it turns out that Patterson has that one too, because he tells a story about after he had his first couple successes with books, he went to his publisher and he had 3 book ideas he wanted to write. One was another Alex Cross book, which was his first big commercial success, was an Alex Cross book. Another one was another kind of that type of thriller type of book. And then the third one was a love story. And he said he went through each of the books. He said when he told him the love story, the publisher was literally crying as he told him the story.
Wow.
And then the publisher said, we'll take the Alex Cross book, we'll take the other book, but we're really not interested in the love story. That's not your brand. And he was like, who says it's not my brand? First of all, he's like, I think I know a few things about brands. And secondly, I don't really want to think of myself as a brand, but that's okay for whatever. It turns out that that's one of his most successful books ever is a love story, right? So the idea of like, he has the ability to stand firm in the face of doubters. And he also has another one that's on the list, much stronger than I probably do, which is he has the ability to trust his instincts. He has really good instincts, and not everybody does. I mean, not everybody has a gut worth trusting. If you think you do, kind of look at your track record. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I was talking to this group one time in the Bahamas. We were at one of those big hotels that had casino and all that. And I said, I got to that behavior. I said, who here thinks they have a gut worth trusting, or everybody has a gut worth trusting? I said it that way. And like a lot of hands went up. I'm like, seriously? You think, 80% of you think everybody has a gut worth trusting? I'm like, go to that casino floor right now and tell me. And I said, better yet, go at 2 a.m. When they already made one choice about drinking alcohol, and now they're going to make other choices about their betting. So there's these 16 things, and I'll say them just very quickly so people can even see if they relate to them at all. And I'm going to do them by memory. So here we go. The brain's one. The first one is they think deeply to gain insights. So
Okay.
they're not just sleepwalking through life. They're looking at stuff and they're going, okay, what's the insight here? And an insight's something that few people know and is valuable.
Yeah.
So that's an insight. The second one is they believe better is possible, which means they don't just settle for good on certain things. They choose to go, you know what, we can do better with this.
Yeah.
The ones around ears, these people listen to understand. Also, the second behavior is they also have the potential to hear what's not being said. And some people are good at one, the other, some both.
Yeah.
The eyes, they have the ability to cast a vision, like we're going to climb that mountain.
Yeah.
But another behavior is at the eyes is they can look at the brutal reality of where they stand. Having these together is a good thing, but not everybody has them together.
Sure.
But it would be like me saying, you know, I want to be an NBA player. That's my vision. Well, I'm 5'8", 57 years old with a vertical of about 1.5 inches. So that's not happening, right?
Yeah.
So brutal reality. The mouth is they have the ability to say smart things. And we fill a lot of time. I've been doing it for nearly an hour with you with words. You know, how many of them are actually smart or valuable?
Yeah.
So if people are telling you that's a good question, or I hadn't thought about it that way, you probably are putting a signal out to the world. You say smart things. The other one with the mouth is they stay on message. So it's not Monday. You talk about work being challenging. On Monday, if your boss is saying this is the big goal, by Wednesday they've changed it to something else. And Friday they don't remember saying any of those things. That's kind of a frustrating gig.
Yeah.
Heart is the ability to see needs in the world and be pulled by them, feeling them. And the other part of heart is actually to bridge the gap then and close the gap. Because sometimes I can flip through channels on TV and I see something, oh, that's terrible, that's happening. And then I just keep flipping.
Sure.
And other times it's like I see it's terrible and I'm going to do something about it. Right. And then let's see, gut, they have instincts, we're trusting. Also, they can push past the butterflies. And then the hands ones are, they let go of good to get better. So I let go of that relationship that's struggling to get a better relationship, that job to get a better job, that project or that client to get a better project or client, or I'm willing to at least sacrifice it in order to turn it into better, take the risk.
Yeah.
And then the second one with the hands is they can roll their sleeves up and get their hands dirty.
Yeah.
And then the feet ones we touched on, run toward disruption and stand firm in the face of doubters.
Yeah. That's a really good list. I think what's beautiful about that list is almost certainly everybody's going to nod their head to some, and others, they're going to be like, you know, and there might be a few where they think they're nodding their heads. And then if they spend a little more time with it, it might be like, you know.
Well, that's the beautiful thing I realized as we were going through this is that if everybody has at least one or two of these, maybe more, I mean, I want to get something done. That means I need to look to my left and right and say, who else can bring this to the table?
Yeah.
You know, a great team is complementary. Stephen Covey, I mentioned him earlier. He used to say a great team is complementary. You take the weaknesses of one and then take the strengths of one and make the weaknesses of another irrelevant. Yeah. That's what it means to be complementary.
Yeah. And I think we don't always do a good job of that in the workplace,
especially if we're busy and we're running from thing to thing and crisis to crisis, we don't take the time to look around and see what our people bring to the table.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if we don't take the time to figure out what they bring to the table or space for them to practice and utilize that in collaborative ways, that's what we're going to get. Keep getting what we get.
And I think that's the frustration a lot of folks are feeling is they know they've got some of these things. They know they could bring value, and we're running right past them, and we're running right past the opportunities because of all of this. You know, I had written down some of these beforehand, and a couple that jumped out at me that I know I'm either intrigued by, maybe good at, maybe not so good at. But the ones that really stood at me was the running towards disruption was really interesting because I think I'm probably middle on that. There are times where I feel comfortable doing that and other times where, you know, I don't even want to acknowledge that the disruption exists. I just want to like put my head in the sand. So that one struck me as interesting. Letting go of sort of good things to pursue better or great things. Again, times I do that, but a lot of times it feels okay to me. You know,
and it doesn't have to be for everything, right? I mean, what if 80%? Just hang out to good. Good's good.
Yeah. And there's a discernment needed there to just recognize when is good enough and when do you need to take that leap to great. And then the one that really struck me, and this is just particularly as a leader, but that consistency of message and repeating the message. I think I read something that like when a leader says something, they actually need to say it 7 times before their team actually fully absorbs it. So there's that piece of it, which is, we often feel as leaders, I said the thing, don't they know it already? And it's like, no, they simply don't.
I put the poster up. We came up with an acronym. We got a signature block.
Come on.
Let's go.
It's there. And we forget that like we've said it in leadership meetings 1,000 times.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. When
Yeah.
change comes down in organizations
Yeah.
and leaders are like, why isn't the team jumping on it? Well, because they haven't had 3 months of processing it like you have.
Exactly. And then the other piece of that that I really liked was the shifting gears so quickly. Like I understand sometimes that needs to happen, but when it feels like leaders are not grounded in any way and it's sort of the flavor of the day. Today it's all about AI. Tomorrow it's all about, whatever, about human relationships and blah, blah, blah. How can you possibly expect anybody to be feeling safe enough to embrace whatever change you're trying to undertake?
Exactly.
So I think these are really great tools. I mean, I get that it would have been nice to have like the 3 steps to mastering disruption, but I actually think there's something more nice and beautiful about it being this broader swath. And it's a little bit of a menu that we can, what am I good at? Where do I want to grow? And then lean into those things and you'll be fine.
Yeah, the nice part is by working with Jim Patterson is he's a page turner when he writes. So
Yeah.
if you take a bunch of stuff and put it in a book in a way that people can quickly digest it, because it is pretty quick to read. It's about a bunch of I think interesting stories in it of different people we interviewed, and all of a sudden you kind of get through it in a couple hours or a few hours, and you're like, oh, it's really interesting. I'll think about it later, and that's what we want people to do. As he would tell you, if he was on this call, he would say, the book is not a one size fits all in regard to every person needs to do every step exactly as way we talk about it.
Yeah.
People approach it in different ways. And if you start to read one of the stories in your book, you're like, this one's not really resonating with me.
Yeah.
Skip the story.
Yeah.
It's your choice.
Yeah. I listened to the book and it was wonderful. It was nice. I mean, it's read in mostly your voice, but James also reads a chunk of it in the beginning. I know I've been asking you a bunch of questions here, and I've loved this conversation, but I want to give you a chance to toss a question out to our audience. What do you want to share with them?
I would want to know from them, the question I want to ask them, if there was something that they feel like this is a practice or a habit or a situation or a relationship that I need to disrupt in the next 6 to 12 months, what would it be?
I love that one. It's already got me thinking, and I'm not sure yet. So I'll ponder that one as well.
It could be anything, right? It could be a fitness routine. It could be a diet. It could be sleep patterns. It could be all sorts of things. But maybe the habit you've been following served you to a point, but it's not there anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you could wave a magic wand and fully desuckify the world of work for people, what does that world look like?
Intents are pure, and they're accepted as pure.
I like that.
Yeah, I remember, I think I have pretty decent intentions for the most part. Sometimes I forget, though, to tell people my intentions. So I start doing something and they, depending upon history, they might assume I'm doing it for nefarious purposes or whatever it might be.
Sure.
I remember when I would fly out to our office, we had an office in DC, and I would get up early in the morning sometimes. And you go back, when you fly to the same place a lot, you go through, or any travel a lot, you'll do this thing where for a while, you're like, I'm not traveling out in the morning. It's too early. I'm going to go out the night before and get a good night's rest. And then you do that a few times. You're like, forget that. I'm staying at home. I'm sleeping in my own bed. This time I'm going to fly early. So you go back. So I would do that. And I would take the early flight sometimes, like 5:30 would take off or something. And I'd fly to my office. And by the time I got to the office and people are showing up for work, I'm already, 3.5 hours into commute and everything else.
Yeah.
I've thought of the 10 things we need to do type of thing. And I can remember a couple times, probably more than twice, asking everybody to join me in the conference room. And I lay out some grand scheme of something we need to do, because I've been strategizing on this for a while on the plane, and it's just inherently brilliant. And, and then it's almost like I jumped in the water and I start swimming, and I look back at my team and all great people, but they're all standing on a dock line going, why is this jerk in the water swimming, right? What's he talking about, right? So it took me a while to figure out the idea of intent, of being able to say, hey, I've been thinking about this for a while on the plane. I think it's a good idea. I'm excited about it. Let me run it by you. My intent here is not to force this on you. My intent is to really have a conversation, which it was.
Yeah.
So here you go. And I just think the ability to declare your intent, and then also just assume that people are coming with good intentions.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we're just kind of fumbly bumbly with it, like I am.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I think I get that from both sides. I get it.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to do on this show, if you've listened at all, is bring some sound effects into the beginning and end of the show. You'll hear cats meowing and other silly stuff. And I invite every guest, if they're up for it, to bring a sound in that will show up somewhere during our episode. So are you up for making a sound or bringing a sound
I'm
in
up
here?
I'm up for making a sound. What the heck? I said I could thrive at ambiguity, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Should I tell you what this sound is supposed to be?
Let's just do the sound and then I'll see if I know.
Boom.
Sounds kind of like a tire going out. But
we'll take it. A tire blew up.
Okay.
To me, I was going for like I'm burning like lighting something. It's boom.
The boom.
But either way, yeah. From disruption to innovation, baby. That's what I was going for.
No, I like it. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That will definitely show up in the beginning of our episode.
I bet it will with me crying and going, what the heck was that?
So the last question for you, Patrick, is simply how do people track you down and learn more about your book and all the good work you're doing?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Just go to patrickleddin.com. It's Leddin, or go to disrupteverything.com. You can find me on either one of those.
Awesome.
I'm on LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn writing for once a week for many, many years.
Awesome.
And trying to help people out along their journey. But yeah, just stay in touch. If you have a story of things that you're just disrupting in your life, we actually have a place. We're trying to build a bit of a community of positive disruptors. So you can go to the website and either take a photo and upload it, tell your story in written form, or record a video and share it with people and encourage them to step up and disrupt for good.
I like that. That's a really cool invitation. Well, thank you, Patrick. I'll share all that info in the show notes and invite people to check all this stuff out. The book is amazing. I really did love it. Thank you for coming on and just bringing a lot of good insights and wisdom to the show.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody, for having me. And go ahead and DesuckifyWork. We need it.
Thanks, Patrick. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Patrick for bringing disruptive thinking to the show. You can follow Patrick on LinkedIn and check out his site at disrupteverything.com to learn more about the book and the power of positive disruption. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to find some calm in the chaos of work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. Type meow in the calendar invite, and I'll also send you a free DesuckifyWork t-shirt. Bye, everyone.